Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kason.
All right. Today we've got some great topics for you to talk about. Well, not for you to talk about, for us to talk about. You offered them, we speak about them. That's how this works.
I think so. I think. That's how we've been doing it. I don't know.
While we wait for some people to get in here, we already have a couple already. Hello, everyone. Howling Leon and Alex Clayton. You guys are beasts. Welcome. And thank you. Yes, I did get my hair cut, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Okay, anyways. Before we really jump into the topics, there's a couple things we wanted to say right off the bat, because I think I keep forgetting to mention this, and it's at the end of the podcast when like most people probably aren't watching anymore. So we've been talking about a rebranding. You all right?
Sorry, I'm good. I'm
good. We've been talking about a rebranding of the channel, right? Been teasing it for months. We've been changing the style in which we've been making our videos, all preparing for that. And the time has come. The time has come to unleash it unto the world, to make the change, to go head first into the deep end. So it's going to be a couple weeks from now, about mid-October. We're going to be doing all of our rebranding and releasing all of our videos and announcing all of that. So we just want to let you guys know that's coming in a couple weeks. What that means is that next week will be the final episode of the Dark Pixel Podcast. At least that's the plan for now. Something could come up and change that. Maybe there'll be one more, but I'm fairly certain that next week will be the last podcast that is branded underneath the Dark Pixel name. And after that, we'll be switching.
Podcasting, but it won't be called that anymore.
We will continue podcasting. And as far as I'm aware, you won't have to follow like a new channel or a new thing. It should just switch. Everything should just switch over and you can keep using what you've been using. It should not be in any way inconvenient for you, I believe.
Hope so.
That's the goal there. But it will be switching to a new podcast underneath the new name. There will be a couple of changes that we're making to how we structure those podcasts. And so I want to kind of, let you guys know what we're going to be doing there. So one thing we want to do is, I guess, create a little bit more of a structure to the show that's very consistent, where we have like certain segments that are going to be like mainstay segments and everything like that. I'm going to try and grab one of those soundboards and use those, see how that goes. Yeah. I'm still kind of looking into that. But one thing is that for those of you who've been watching the channel for a while, I used to do these really long-form discussion videos while I was sort of forming my opinions about a game I was going to be covering soon, and I'd bounce ideas off of you. You guys would, rebut and give me some of your ideas, and then that kind of helped me structure a better review overall, right? Or better videos in the end. So what I think we're going to do, Case and I were talking about it, is sort of like repurpose our podcast for that purpose. We're going to be taking topics that we each want to be making videos about, and then we'll use the podcast to discuss that live with you guys. Now, the podcast will no longer be live here on YouTube. It will be uploaded as just as a video on Wednesday mornings. We're going to be live streaming the podcast on Twitch. So I will be hitting you guys up next week with a link to the Twitch channel that we'll be doing the live podcast on, but then that will be edited from there and uploaded on Wednesday. And we'll probably be doing the live stream on Sunday afternoons. So we'll live stream, record. We're going to be very much more, I think, engaged with speaking with you guys directly.
Yeah, that's a goal.
Yeah, I'm looking into allowing people to call in and having a place set up on Discord where you can call in. We can take a call from certain people and have them sort of add to the discussion. So we have some plans, and it's going to take some troubleshooting. It's not going to be perfect on the first episode, but we'll get it figured out. But we're looking at making some structural changes to the show so that Kason and I are able to talk about topics that we're looking to sort of refine our thoughts on so that we can make videos on them in the future. And we'll still take questions from the audience and from Patreon, but those will be coming kind of towards the end, more ask me anything or Q&A type of a deal where it's not going to be like the entire show is topics that are suggested by other people, but more looking at the things that we're looking to really understand better and that we can get ideas from you guys on as we're moving forward with structuring our videos in the future. So, those changes are coming in the next couple of weeks. We will keep you updated. Next week, we'll make sure that we kind of give you all the final details on how that's all going to be handled. But, okay. So, before we jump into our first topic, which is going to be on Tetsuya Nomura hinting at a possible sequel to The World Ends With You, once again, we do have a sponsor for today's episode. So I'm going to cut away for just a moment and let that sponsored message play, and then we'll be right back after that. So just 1 second. Easy to use and effective software for Windows. Since 2004, Movavi has been developing easy-to-use and effective software for Windows to inspire creativity and make processing, creating, and sharing media content fun and fulfilling. Gekata by Movavi can be used to create a unique collection of memorable gaming moments to be shared with others. The software is a versatile and easy-to-use video editor that helps you turn raw footage into complete movies and videos. Features include video and audio editing on a timeline, image quality improvement, Hollywood-style effects, high-grade titles and fades, support for a wide range of formats, support for two-way sound capture, in-game sound effects, music, and dialogue, as well as microphone output, the ability to overlay webcam video footage, where users can choose the size and the position of the webcam window, or even save it as a separate video track for further editing. We have a link in our description below if you'd like to try the free trial version, and the only differences between the full version and the trial version is that on the trial version, you'll have a watermark on the videos that you record, and you'll only be able to record up to 10 minutes at one time. So, for those of you who are interested in capturing your gameplay and being able to edit the video, then try out Gekata by Movavi today by clicking on the link in the description. All right. Okay, so thank you, Movavi, for your sponsorship of today's episode. We appreciate it. Okay, let's get into this. Tetsuya Nomura hints at a possible sequel to The World Ends With You. I'm going to pull up my display for you guys to take a look at real quick here. So this is the... I found this on RPG site. That's where the source is coming from. But here's the quote. I've had a chance to attend various events in different countries during the 11 years following the release of The World Ends With You. On many occasions, I've been interviewed by both the fans and the media, who've told me how much they want me to make a sequel for The World Ends With You. We've been looking for an opportunity, and there were a few times we tried to get it started, but time passed without it ever coming to realization. There are a number of implications behind this final remix version. This is the important part what he's saying here. In addition to my intention of making this my last time working with the original game, I think this is the final chance for creating a path to the next step, which I've had ideas about since the first launch 11 years ago. Many thanks to everyone for supporting ongoing efforts. So, it sounds like he wants to do it. And what he's strongly hinting at here is that the sales of the final remix version, I think, are going to determine whether that is going to happen or not. He's got...
What did it sell? 2 million, something like that? The World Ends With You?
I have no idea, actually. I should look that up real quick.
I think at least on VG charts, which isn't a perfect measure, it's like
that
just
would be phenomenal
under 2 million. What?
That would be phenomenal if that was true. That's incredible for a brand new game. No, it's got 0.78 million on 0.78 million on VG charts.
0.78 total.
Yeah, so it didn't break a million, but it's not bad for a brand new IP.
Not bad at all.
And anyways,
Nomura's got a lot of projects that he's constantly working on. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, but it sounds like he wants to do it. It sounds like he has ideas for it. It's one of the most unique games, I think, that I've seen from Square in the last 20 years or so. And I think there's a lot of people who would be very excited about that, but I think Square at this moment they've got a lot of stuff going on there. They've got the Bravely Default team, who is possibly working on a new Bravely Default game right now. They've got Tokyo RPG Factory. They've got the Octopath Traveler team, all kind of like working in that vein or that style of RPG. They've got the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Kingdom Hearts 3 happening simultaneously, which is Tetsuya Nomura is handling that. They've got their MMO team with Final Fantasy 14. They've got what's his name? The FF15 director. I can't believe I forgot his name. Tabata. His team. They're working on a brand new IP themselves. So they've got a lot going on in there, and I can see how, bringing up The World Ends With You would be like that'd be cool, but I mean, we've got all these other things going on. We have some priorities here. But if we support it, when this new launch of The World Ends With You on the Switch, I think it has a pretty solid chance because, I don't know, like, there are plenty of handheld RPGs that have done really well, and especially in the DS. The DS sold super, super well, and a lot of JRPGs did really well on that. But I feel like the Switch has a lot of momentum right now, and if it could break this re-release or final mix version of The World Ends With You sells well, you could possibly get a sequel. So if you want a sequel to The World Ends With You, The World Ends With You, pick it up. That would require, of course, that you have a Switch.
Is that the only platform it's available on?
Well, actually, that's a good question. I thought it was a Switch exclusive, but I don't know if they're going to release it on other platforms. I don't know why they wouldn't, now that I think about it. Let's see, The World Ends With You Final Remix.
Maybe just because it was a handheld, they wanted to keep it on a handheld console.
As far as I know, it is a Nintendo Switch exclusive.
Huh.
But if I'm wrong about that, someone in the chat, just let me know that I'm wrong.
You know what to do.
We'll correct that. But as far as I know, it is a Switch exclusive, which will turn a lot of people off, because I know even a lot of people on our channel, they're not really into the Switch. They have PlayStation 4. They've got... Maybe it'll be one of those deals where it launches exclusively for a while, but then eventually they'll have another release on or port to something else. Maybe it'll... I don't know why they wouldn't do that. This is Square. They should be releasing on Steam and PlayStation 4.
GameScore Fanfare here in the comment section says that he thinks it needs touchscreen compatibility, in which case...
It could, because I know that, but the thing is that the original game was on 2 screens. So like during battles, you were actually kind of handling like 2 different things at once. It was actually like pretty chaotic, and they can't do that on the Switch version either. So they've switched it to that it's on 1 screen. So I would actually be surprised if that was like the issue that was keeping it off of being on the PlayStation 4 or something like that, was because they're already changing how the battles work so that you're not actually splitting the screens up, and so it's not quite the same experience as it was on the DS anyways. So
I'm hearing that people are saying it is a Switch exclusive, so
Eric Irving just said it got an HD remix on the iPad, but it doesn't have the additional story of the final mix. So the final mix version will have additional story content in it that was not in that version. But I'm guessing that they're probably basing the Switch version, the port to the Switch, off of that HD version they put on iPad, and then adding to it and tightening it up or making it run better or whatnot. So, anyways... It probably won't happen. So if you love The World Ends With You, that means you had to have played it. Well, I guess you could have played it on iPad, but originally on the DS. Get a Switch and support it. You might just get a sequel to it if it sells well. At least that's what it sounds like Nomura is trying to say to us. In other news, this one I think was a little bit more exciting for me personally. Well, maybe not. I don't know. There have reservations. There's part of me there's parts of it that I think are cool, and there's parts of it that I think are like, well, okay. So this has been all over the place this morning, but apparently there was a leak for a Harry Potter open world action RPG. I'll kind of switch back to the source here for what I was looking at. what this apparently came from was some sort of like a focus group test or something like that somebody sneaked a video out of and uploaded of some gameplay of this Harry Potter game. And what I find funny about it is that the video, at least on this site, was taken down, but it was claimed by Warner Brothers Entertainment, right?
It was claimed. Ooh, well.
And Warner Brothers Entertainment owns the, or at least has the rights for the Harry Potter franchise, right? For games and movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So that lends credence to the fact that this is a real thing. It wasn't like fake, right? On top of that, the footage did look extremely polished for the most part. It has like a character creator in it. I think they show an image of that somewhere. It was probably on a different site. They have like a character creator, so you're coming back to the school, I think, as like a 5th year student or something like that.
At the beginning?
Yeah. Anyways, I think it takes place in like the 1800s, like early 1800s. So it's a time period kind of a little while before, like, obviously the novels took place and the films.
Yeah. That's even cooler, though.
But yeah, open world action RPG, it looked really interesting. And another interesting thing is that people are claiming that Avalanche Software is the developer behind it. They were...
which is crazy.
They were the team that had been bought up by Disney, and they worked on like the Disney Infinity games, right? And then Disney decided they didn't want to make video games anymore, so they sort of like dissolved everything there.
Yeah.
But Avalanche ended up getting purchased by Warner Brothers Interactive, and so there's a possibility that Avalanche, the team behind all these games here in the list I'm showing you, but like a lot of the Disney, I guess, what do you call it, like film to game adaptions, like Toy Story 3 and Cars 2 and stuff, but the Disney Infinity games, which were very popular and apparently very well made, they are the team that is allegedly behind this Harry Potter game. So an established company. I found it interesting that they're actually from Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I've actually met the CEO before.
I didn't know that. That's crazy. That's awesome.
He spoke at a digital conference, and it was interesting because it was right before the whole thing happened. And he was telling this very inspiring story about how they started out in Salt Lake, became this big deal. Disney bought them out. They started, making these big games, shipping these large volume of amiibo. What do you call those things?
The
Disney Infinity toys.
Yeah, they're basically
I remember what they're called. Anyways, it was really cool. And he was like, we're gearing up for 3.0. And one thing that he did mention, though, was that they had shipped the Hulk. They had shipped like 1 million units of the Hulk figurine and only sold like less than a quarter of the inventory. And they have warehouses of just Hulk figurines. And I remember thinking about that as soon as I heard that Avalanche was being let go by Disney and that Disney didn't want to be involved in making these games anymore. Thinking that, like, man, it's got to be the fact that they had to order those figurines ahead of time and they had to guess how many they would sell. And if you got it wrong, you
lost a lot of money
cost. Yeah. And they got it wrong a few times. And even when you get it right, it's like you didn't meet the demand. Possibly you should have produced more. So it's really difficult for them to get that down, which is why Nintendo's played this conservative game of just don't give that many to begin with. They don't want to deal with surplus amounts of amiibo. But yeah, I've met the guy. He's a really cool guy.
That's awesome. Harry Potter appealed to me a lot more. Like, if this game had been around when I was like 14, 15 years old, I would have been losing my mind.
Me too. This is cool.
However, it has been a very long time since I have revisited those novels or those films. And there's something about this coming out that was going like, maybe I'll give that a shot. Maybe I'll jump back in, see what it's all about.
Yeah.
I loved it growing up.
This actually reminds me a little bit of, the company that made, well, not the company that made Stardew Valley, but the company that published Stardew Valley. They are making a new game that's kind of in the same vein of Stardew Valley, except it's wizards in wizarding school. And it's basically just Harry Potter mixed with Stardew Valley, and it's in the 2D aesthetic, and that's what that is what I'm really looking forward to.
That'd be sweet.
The 3D open world Harry Potter, okay, that's cool too. But this new like Stardew Valley Harry Potter cross, that's what I'm really excited about.
That'd be pretty sweet, actually.
Yeah. But just the whole concept. It's funny. Harry Potter's been a little bit underserved if you think about it. Looking at all the Lord of the Rings games and Star Wars games, and like Harry Potter's a huge franchise, and they made a game based on the movies, right? Just like
they got
just
so
like every
bad. The longer it went on, they got worse and worse.
Exactly. Yeah. The second or third one was really good, and they just weren't all that great after that. But every movie makes a game, right? And these games weren't anything special. And I guess Lego had a Lego Harry Potter.
Yeah, that's supposed to be pretty fun.
They haven't really gone crazy and made like a ton of Harry Potter games, and I don't know if it's a licensing or a rights issue, but that's just waiting to be exploited.
Yep. And who better than Warner Brothers to do the exploiting?
Themselves. I wonder if J.K. Rowling's gonna have anything to do with this.
I have no idea. She'll
Probably
make money on it either way. But anyways, if anyone is interested in that, take a look at that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move. Oh, wait,
score fanfare. Witchbrook. Look that game up.
Oh, I was gonna say, talking about Harry Potter being underserved. You were talking specifically about video games, but
yeah,
I was going back to me talking about like how it doesn't appeal to me like it used to. Did you ever see any of those Fantastic Beasts movies?
No. However, okay, so the first Fantastic Beasts came out, and I bought Fantastic Beasts when that book first came out. It's just an encyclopedia of all the stuff. There's not like much of a story. So I remember. Well, and I could be wrong about that. Maybe there's more of a story than I remember. I just remember looking at the pictures and stuff, and it wasn't anything special. And I remember when they started making this movie, I was like, why did they call it that? And how, I don't know. I wasn't into it very much. However, this second one that's coming out in like a month, I watched a trailer for it, and Jude Law is young Dumbledore.
Yeah.
I don't usually get super excited when I see an actor that I like, but Jude Law has kind of been out of the spotlight for a while. He hasn't been in any huge movies. He was Watson in Sherlock with Robert Downey Jr. And he's in movies like 20 years ago, but now he's like, I don't know. He's one of my favorite actors of all time. And it's really exciting not just to see him get back into, being in these big production films, but he's Dumbledore, dude. Like, oh man, that's cool. That's cool.
Sweet. I have no idea what the stories of those Fantastic Beasts movies or books are, but
they kind of just. Here's a cool thing about those is that J.K. Rowling is actually in a supervisor role for the screenplay. I don't think she writes the screenplay, but I think she's contributed a ton to the story. It's probably worked into the contract. She won't let them do whatever they want. She still has. It's not like George Lucas where he's just like whatever. Like she lets them do their thing, but she has a lot more say. Than I think people realize. So a lot of this stuff really is still being controlled by her to some extent. So it can't be all that bad. I'm going to watch the first one because I really want to watch the second one. I'll just have to let you know how it is.
Okay, sounds good. I'll wait for your review.
Yeah, I'll let you know. The whole thing that appealed to me for Harry Potter though was like the school setting, the young like coming of age stuff.
Yeah,
they just don't have that in these new films. So. I don't know.
I just remember that when I was reading it as like a 15-year-old, what is it that they call like the special agent dudes that Harry Potter himself
Aurors, Auror.
Yeah.
The Aurors, yeah.
I was like, dude, that sounds sick. I want a movie about that. Is that what this is?
I guess to some extent Aurors are in it, but it follows some like goofy kid. Like not kid, he's like 20, I guess, but
they need a
commander.
movie.
I don't know.
They need a movie that's almost like a spy thriller, but it's like the R's is like the Wizarding World's version of like MI6 or whatever.
That'd be sick.
And Tom Cruise. It's like an espionage movie, but it's like wizards and stuff. That'd be so sweet.
That would be cool because they never really explored that. The only like the closest we saw to an Auror like in action was Moody, Professor Moody, and even then like. 90% of the time you saw him, it wasn't, well, spoiler alert, I guess. It may or may not have actually been the real Professor Moody. So that's kind of disappointing. They talk about the Aurors like they're these cool things, and you really don't get to see much of that.
Interesting.
That's waiting to be exploited.
They need a freaking horrors movie. That's all I'm saying, man.
They should make one. Just call it horrors too.
Needs to be freaking hardcore too.
That's a hard word to say though.
It is. It's
horror.
That's why I forgot it. I was beginning this conversation. I was like, what are those dudes called again?
I just remember it because the city in Denver called Aurora, and every time I'd hear the word Aurora, I'd think of, if you just put an A on there, you've got Aurora.
By the way, since GameScore Fanfare is here, let's just do a shout out to his channel real quick. Go watch it. He makes awesome videos about music in games, and it blows me away. And he's super good. And he's been a guest on this podcast before. So check him out. Click on his channel right there. Go watch his videos.
It's right there.
Okay. Let's jump into our first topic, suggested by Caius Nelson. What do you think of episodic games as a solution to the games being too long problem? Say if in Xenoblade 2, every month they released a new episode that allowed you to travel to a new Titan and play the next chapter of the game, or where the game would be released in 5 to 10 hour chunks over the course of a year or so. I feel like this would be an interesting way of being able to allow time for people with more real-world responsibilities to still keep up and enjoy the game, while still retaining that feeling of a grand and expansive story and scale. Okay, so I think that when you look at it kind of as a surface level solution, it's like, maybe that could work. However, I think there's an issue. I think you'd have to release them really quickly back to back in order for that to work, because what breaking them up like that, unfortunately, the side effect of that, I think for me, is that it would create pacing issues, where you have like these long breaks and you can't really like get into it and get like into the flow unless they were structured in such a way to where like each one was almost like self-contained, right? Like each episode of 5 to 10 hours was almost like its own game, and then it's like a sequel or something like that, rather than it being, here's just chapter 1 and then moving to chapter 2. I think when you do that, you get into this place where it's like, well, I want to know what happens next so bad when you reach the end of that, but now you got to wait, and it really like can hurt the flow and the pacing of the story in a way that I think would be really frustrating for a lot of people. I don't know. In addition to that, this is not a good example because it's how you do it wrong. But I remember Parker actually was introducing me to a game called Kentucky Route Zero, which is like an indie game on Steam, and they were just like months and months, and I think even years in between episode releases. And so I got way into that, and I was like, dude, this is a really great game. And then it was like, I didn't play it for months or even a year. And then it's like, oh, next episode. And I remember distinctly going, I don't care anymore. I don't remember what the story was at. I don't remember what I was doing. I'd have to start over anyway. So screw that. I'm not gonna get it. So I think that you run the risk of that happening when you break up a story too much into an episodic format. Now, of course, this works for television shows and stuff like that, but it's because they're releasing like week to week to week. It's not like not a month you have to wait for the next episode, or a couple months or a year to the next thing. It's Sunday night to Sunday night. And I think with 1 week in between, you can kind of talk about it with your friends, and you can like get hyped about it. Yeah. And it's still popular, and it's still buzzing, and people are still excited about it. And so like a week in between releases, I think would be like the absolute longest you could wait in order to keep people really engaged. Otherwise, I think a lot of people will drop off or forget where they were at or had moved on to something else and kind of just...
I'll tell you what, even that is going by the wayside now, because with what Netflix and Amazon...
Oh, you're right.
The whole concept of binge watching, which is what people wanted to do back then, they just couldn't. So you had to wait a week, and they were just talking about amongst their friends because they couldn't. What else are you going to do, right? You just talk about it. You can't watch it. And then when it comes out, you see it. But now it's like you can watch the whole thing so quickly. Now, if you really want to be ahead, you can watch it on TV. But for the most part, this stuff just gets dropped online, and people watch the whole thing in a day now. And I think it's awful. I have never been a binge watcher. I don't understand my friends that do that. But it's funny because that kind of shows you almost like the Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition, right? You got like the 10 episodes, and you can just buy them whenever you want. Like you're basically binge playing the game that would otherwise have been episodic, bi-weekly or something like that. And instead it's like, oh, you still have your episodic framework. You can save money by not buying the next episode, but it's right there. So I think what you're saying is basically spot on. You can't wait very long. Like it needs to be available while the people are ready to spend their money on it.
GameScore Fanfare and Dude McGuy, I think, both make pretty good points. Dude McGuy up here had said, hold on, it's scrolling fast. If it's episodic, I'm always tempted to wait until it's all released, which is kind of what you're talking about.
So that you can binge watch.
So that you can binge watch, right? Now, I binge watch a little bit. I've never gone through an entire season of a show in one day.
Yeah.
But I do find myself getting caught up, especially if it's like after work and it's late and it's like, I'm going to watch one episode and go to sleep. What I will sacrifice, what I will sacrifice is sleep in order to get through. Because they always
good story. I know how it is. Yeah.
Because they always leave you off on a spot where it's like the worst possible place to stop. And when I tell myself,
because I talked to my wife about this, we watch a lot of Korean television, and those shows masterfully craft the art of a cliffhanger ending. Right. Every episode ends on what is basically just the most ridiculous cliffhanger ever, but somehow each subsequent episode tops the one before it. And so my wife will always say, oh my gosh, we have to watch the next one because it was such a cliffhanger. And I'm like, but the next one's going to have an even bigger cliffhanger. So we just got to cut it now. You just have to stop watching now.
Yeah, you just have to. That's what you have to do. You just have to be disciplined enough to say,
no,
I'll just figure this out later. Because what I would often try to do, like I just went through the tutors over the last couple weeks. And what I would do is I'd get to the cliffhanger and be like, okay, I'm going to watch the first scene of the next episode because they'll probably resolve that particular thing.
Oh, it turns out it was nothing, right? Yeah.
But because that's what I'm thinking, right? I'll be like, okay, then I'll be satisfied enough to stop and pause.
But
they knew that. I feel like they knew that because they would create a new issue in like the first scene that didn't resolve the last one, and now we have two problems. It's like, oh, fetch, and like and then I'd watch like half the episode and be like, okay, I'm halfway through. Like, what time is it? Like, can I sacrifice an hour of sleep? And then I watch just one more scene, and then it's like, okay, there's only like 15 minutes left. That's not like that much. Just finish it, and then it just cycles again, and it's just like, gosh, dang it, dude.
Another cliffhanger. You never see it coming, but it always happens. It always happens.
Oh man, it was terrible. I would end up watching 3 or 4 episodes at a time. Luckily, that show is 4 seasons, 10 episodes each, not one of those like 8, 10 season.
20 episodes each. Yeah,
like crazy long things. So
yeah.
I got through it pretty fast, but I know somebody who just started watching that show, Vikings.
Oh, and, the History Channel.
And she was like, yo, I'm going to start watching Vikings. And I was like, cool, let me know how it is. And she was like, I'm on Vikings season 2. I was like, what the fetch?
Wait, I thought you said you just started watching it.
It was like literally the next thing she said, and I think it was the next day. She watched the whole first season. And so, like, and then school kicked up, and it was like, okay, she slowed down on Vikings season 2. But anyways, I could fall into that because, man, I hate feeling like unresolved, but that's what TV is. TV is about leaving you feeling unresolved, unless it's like classic TV. Because classic TV was like every episode is self-contained, and they resolve it by the end, and you feel good. It's like, oh, great, that was awesome.
You still get that with some of the longer-running shows, like Law and Order, that's been on for like 25 years. They will package up their whole episodes. Yeah. You know, they don't, there's not very many times where they actually have a cliffhanger ending.
Yeah.
But that's because that show's from, early 90s, right? The shows today, they don't do that. But now that binge watching becomes more of a thing, I would hope that cliffhangers kind of stop being utilized the way that they are. But I could be wrong about that, because a lot of books, you read a book and the end of a chapter is a cliffhanger.
That's true.
And it's like, turn the page. It's not hard. Like, you can find out what happens next. A lot of the Harry Potter books do that. Although sometimes in between each chapter, they're talking about it, like what you said before, they're talking about a different thing. they're focusing on a different character. You don't find out that cliffhanger till the next chapter.
Like Songs of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones series, right?
Yeah,
like,
as they alternate.
It's like the next chapter is a totally different character on the other side of the freaking world. And it's like, oh, I'm not getting my answer to this. What's the next chapter for Tyrion?
Yeah, and then just like flip through them. I think, though, that these stories are crafted the way that they are and they lead up. I know that there's a gimmicky aspect to cliffhangers. I totally get that, and I don't really like it.
Oh, crap, we're losing you. Hold on, Kason. We're losing you a little bit. You left off on saying I don't really like it, but and then your connection completely failed.
Because I've talked about
that's hilarious.
This a lot. Maybe over.
It just keeps going on. Okay, now he's actually disconnected. He'll be back in a second. Okay, so GameScore Fanfare was saying here, if games incorporate replayability, then episodic could work. Hitman, for example, worked really well. So I haven't played Hitman, but the idea being that while you're waiting for the next episode to come out, there is a lot of extra content there for you to continue to engage in. And that is, I think, a good point to make. So you can still keep playing the game and keep, you can continue to explore new content even though the story of that particular chapter or episode is over, and there's a lot more to do in the game than just that, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm going to go explore this and do the side content, and then by the time you've completed that stuff, then you drop your next episode. Again, I don't know how, because people play through games pretty fast, man. Like, when a game drops, I'm so surprised. Like, a new game will drop, and it's like 2 days later, people are talking about, like, the end of the game. And, like, they literally take time off and sit down, like, time off from work, and they sit down, they just play that game for, like, 3 straight days and beat it. So, while I think that can work for maybe, like, the average person, what's up? Welcome back.
Sorry.
We'll get back to your point in just a minute. I remember where you left off. Okay. I was just talking about GameScore Fanfare had made a point about making the game have a lot of replayability in between episodes. So there's more content to explore.
So you replay it over and over.
Well, not replaying the story, but I think maybe even a better point is that you are exploring more of the side content and like the extra stuff there is to do in the game, and you're still like enjoying that until the next one's dropped. But then on top of that, I was talking about how people will take a couple days off of work when a new game drops, and they'll just play it for 2-3 straight days, and they'll beat it. And I think for a lot of people that's not everybody, obviously. For the average person, that could work, but I think that would take some really skillful pacing. And a lot of dedication. But even still, if you're going to release the next episode longer than a month after that, I think that most people will have gotten through that 10 to 15 hour chunk of first chapter and have finished most of what's there, and now they're waiting for the next thing. I think overall for games, it's just better to release it as a complete product, in my personal opinion. But he brought up Hitman as an example, and I have not played Hitman. So I can't speak for that. So maybe
I played the first Hitman, but I don't remember much about it.
Yeah. Anyways, you were making a point about cliffhangers.
It was a minor point, just about cliffhangers in general, just about how the director has packaged the show up in a certain way, and if you move on to the next show just to resolve the cliffhanger, then you're what is it? You're not respecting the director and his presentation of the story. So anyways, that's all. I've said that a lot before, because that's how I kind of feel about video games in certain ways, or, just the way that a director has crafted everything. It's flowing the way it's meant to flow. And you mess with the way a director wants things to go at your own risk of maybe not enjoying, the art as much. But there you go. Minor point.
Anyways, that was a good topic. Thank you, Caius Nelson, for bringing that one up. Had a good discussion on that. Appreciate you. The next one, I put it in here because it is a good question. I like the question. I just don't think I have anything good to say about it, but I'm going to give it a shot, I guess. This may be a short topic. Daniel Burnham asks, apropos of Nobuo Uematsu's hiatus, what advice would you want to give to a new generation of Final Fantasy or other video game composers? What musical trends or motifs would you like to see more of? And what would you like to see left behind for soundtracks in the 2020s? First of all, I think that I'm not even within a billion light years of being qualified to give advice to anyone who's going to be doing music for Final Fantasy games. So I don't want to take this so much as advice as what I think I've come to see from speaking with people in the community, in our community, and people who love Final Fantasy, and what the general opinions have been of the soundtracks. And the thing is that you have an impossible act to follow. You have to accept that. Everyone is going to compare you to Nobuo Uematsu and the way that he created his OSTs back in the 90s, all the way up through Final Fantasy X. And people after that, or composers who came after that, even Sakimoto, who I think is great. I love the Final Fantasy Tactics soundtrack. I really, really like the Vagrant Story soundtrack, and even Final Fantasy 12. I think it's fantastic. I listen to it.
I think it's good.
In my free time. I think it's super good, but there are a lot of people who disagree with that, and there are a lot of people who really don't like it. And it's because it's Sakimoto's style in a mainline Final Fantasy game, and so much of the identity of the feel and the sound of Final Fantasy was just tied into and staked into Nobuo Uematsu's style. So I think no matter what you do, if you try to bring your own flavor and your own style into something, which is what you should do, that's why you're being picked to do it, you're going to hit some criticism. I liked the Final Fantasy 13 soundtrack quite a lot as well. Hamauzu, I think, is great. He's done other games for Square, like World of Final Fantasy. I think he writes beautiful music. He did a lot of music in Final Fantasy X that people loved. But Final Fantasy 13 gets criticized quite a lot. So it's my advice would be to bring what you know to it, and don't try to live in Nobuo Uematsu's shadow, and realize that people are going to be critical of your music, but just do what you know and do what you feel is right, and just let it be what it is. And people are going to hate on you. It's going to happen. Nothing you can do about it, really. But don't try to copy Uematsu's style or emulate his style. I think that you could try to emulate it in some ways and probably be okay if that's kind of your inspiration to begin with, and you write music like him in certain ways, and that's part of who you are. But what I mean by don't try to emulate him is don't step outside of who you are to try and make a soundtrack like he does. You know what I mean? Like, be yourself, be who you are. That would be my advice. But on top of that, this is more, I think, of a Square decision than it is a composer's decision. I guess it could be a composer's decision. But one thing I have noticed in my discussions with players is that they tend to like the really heavy melodic soundtracks in Final Fantasy. They want really strong melody. They don't want atmospheric music. They don't want ambience. They want strong melodic music in Final Fantasy. So Square should, I think, be picking people that embody that style of writing if they want to please the fan base. But like I said, I don't think I'm qualified to answer this question. That's the best I can do.
Me neither, but I play guitar, so more guitar, please. Just kidding. I don't know.
Put more freaking prog rock organ.
More rock, more cowbell, more woodblock.
Exactly.
More solos.
Yeah, I think that the final part of the question, though, what musical trends or motifs would you like to see more of, and what would you like to see left behind in soundtracks in the 2020s? I think that ambience atmospheric music became a lot more popular, I guess. It's used more often. This is both true for games and films in the last 10, 15 years, something like that. You don't see a lot of the sweeping John Williams style sort of scores in film. And this is why a lot of people don't like Hans Zimmer, because Hans Zimmer's approach is kind of the other way around. It's very much more about making you try to feel the emotion and using just a lot of drones and atmosphere. And I think people, with repetition, with enough repetition, when something becomes popular, everyone flocks to that and tries to emulate that and do it that way. And they ride on that and they milk it to death. And at this point in time, I think people are starting to get tired of that kind of soundtrack. And they want a bit of a return to their childhood in the 90s when John Williams and all those guys, Danny Elfman and stuff, were at their peak in Hollywood. Yeah. When Nobuo Uematsu and a lot of those composers were at their peak in video games.
They started, yeah, exactly.
Where it was very, very heavily, where they heavily emphasized melody, and melody was like really, really important, really strong. So I would say that that's probably the way that I would trend if I were in charge of anything moving into the 2020s.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Daniel. Moving on now to Joshua Oji.
Oji.
This is a big one. We talk a lot about JRPGs individually, but not a lot of talk goes into how we can usually predict some aspects of what we are in for by the developers making the game. For example, Tri-Ace games will typically be heavy on the mechanics. A game developed by Square Enix will look astounding. A Falcom title will have great characters. A Monolith title will have a bonkers plot, etc. What other developer tendencies can you name? Are there any that coincide with preferences that you have? Do you think there are any that might cause a resurgence in JRPGs if matched to an interesting title?
I do, and it's one that happened to be left off the list, but that would be Atlas.
Atlas,
because
tons of superfluous dialogue.
Yo, absolutely. That could be it. But I would also say that Atlas tends to like do a middle job at all categories. Like they're like in the middle. They don't have the best like looking stuff or anything by any means. They're not the most complicated. They're not, but they're like good enough at everything to where they kind of end up being some of the better games in the genre now.
I think another really positive point on Atlas, though, something that they really excel at, is style. Art direction is I guess it's kind of in the same camp as with Square Enix. Square Enix is different though. Like Square Enix is about like in like really high visual fidelity, like realistic looking stuff. The simulations are just like off the charts. The pre-rendered cutscenes and stuff like that are just like mind-blowing. But with games like Persona, it's like the UI design, the creativity and the charm that goes into how menus look and transitions and stuff like that. Like that sort of side of the art direction, I think, is where they really, really excel. So yeah, they're freaking beasts at that. In terms of other like RPG developers, I mean, you named a lot of them there, kind of like the major ones. But you can count on Ubisoft to make a third-person parkour open world game every time. That'll have a very repetitive mission structure. You can count on you can point at almost any developer and look at their most popular game and be like, that's kind of who they are, and they sort of embody that. So there's probably a lot we could list. But are there any that coincide with preferences that you have? Well, yes. I mean, I'm trying to think of like a single developer that, because I want to say CD Projekt Red, but the thing is that I'm not like overly stoked about Cyberpunk right now.
Yeah,
Like
me neither.
it looks cool, and I probably will try it, or you know, at least look into it when it comes out. But like with the Witcher games, they hit everything. Like that's basically the game I want. is the Witcher?
Again.
That's the Witcher 3 is like that's fetching like what I'm after. That's what I'm looking for. It hit all the right notes for me, but I don't think Cyberpunk is doing that, at least at the moment for me. So I can't say them really. Ubisoft used to be that for me when Prince of Persia was their thing, right? When the Prince of Persia Sands of Time trilogy was coming out, that's when, and they had Splinter Cell was kind of at a high point during that time period.
Yeah.
They also had Beyond Good and Evil around the same time. Like Ubisoft was really hitting all those notes for me during that time period. But when Assassin's Creed took over, I was into that for a bit, and then I've really lost interest in that kind of style of game. They've moved away from like what I really loved about what they did back in like the early 2000s. So I don't know if there's any single developer I can think of right now that hits exactly all the right notes that I'm looking for. Like they have the tropes or their tendencies speak exactly to me. I don't know. I can't think of one that's doing it exactly right all the time. Every game they release is just
well,
like
no
perfect.
one, no one's like perfect, but
yeah,
I have to say Nintendo, and that's probably been
that's fair.
The case for my whole life, I guess. Nintendo hasn't really changed much though since the 80s in terms of their goal and their structure and the way they do things and their innovation. It's the same company they've been for 30 years. In some ways that's a bad thing, and a lot of people like to bring that up.
Yeah.
But they're the same company they were from my childhood, and they're doing great. Their games are still super good. They tend to do things I don't like as much, but what can I say?
I think Nintendo's probably the closest for me too.
Yeah.
Probably with the exception of, and it's not to knock Breath of the Wild, but to say that they introduced elements into Breath of the Wild that were popularized by things Ubisoft are doing, like towers you climb to unlock maps and like things of that nature. That I felt like I think there's a better way to do this. I actually enjoyed more kind of like the classic 3D Zelda structure. At the same time, they're trying to change it up. It has been roughly the same format since Ocarina of Time, and they wanted to change some things up. I think they had some major successes in that area. Having like a true open world. Yeah. So, even though it didn't hit every note that I liked, I think Nintendo, for the most part as a company, gets as close to having tendencies that speak to me that way than probably anyone else. So it's good.
Basically, the only thing Nintendo is really missing is mature storyline.
Yeah.
Like if they had, like their games are the funnest freaking games you can ever play, right? But their stories, and I don't know that that'll ever change. They're the same company from the 80s. They haven't changed really.
I have to recant what I said, because somebody just reminded me of what my actual answer is. FromSoft with Miyazaki at the helm.
FromSoft? Okay.
Yes. So Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne. Probably what will be Sekiro when it comes out next year. Man, I can't tell you. I was playing Bloodborne last month, I think it was.
Oh, Bloodborne's cool.
I just remember being like, dude, like this is it. Like this is it. Like this is my kind of game. Like this is what I look for, man. I have like no criticisms of it. It's freaking amazing. And I felt the same way when Dark Souls came out. Demon Souls took me a while to get into because I was real intimidated by it, but eventually I figured it out, and it's one of my favorite games. So I think From Software is a really good choice there. They have tendencies or tropes that they kind of fall into, or a way of making their games that appeals to me in just about every single way. So I picked them. That's a good pick. Thank you for reminding me of
they haven't messed up yet.
King of the Sharks. You're a beast for reminding me of my own opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that, Joshua Oji, good question. Let's move on to Chocolate Rob next.
Okay.
This is a pretty good one. I like this one. What Final Fantasy game would you like to see set a story in a different age of that world? An earlier mythical age or future tech age. Now, he goes over two pretty good examples. I've often pondered on a pixel art Final Fantasy VI style game set in the world of Final Fantasy VII when Genova first arrived. Final Fantasy
that's
VII
pretty good. That's
Calamity.
pretty good.
That is always my first pick. One
that's
thing that's always bothered me about the way that Square has handled any additional content to Final Fantasy VII is they always want to go after the game takes place or like during the time period right before the game happened or something like that.
Yeah,
it's
so
all
that way
right
they can
around...
still have some of the same characters.
Yes. They got to have Cloud and Sephiroth and Zack and recognizable people in it. And I felt like that story was very complete. Now, a lot of people will disagree with me on this. There's a lot of people that dislike the ending of Final Fantasy VII. I've stated my opinion on that a bunch of times. I think it's freaking amazing. I think it's perfect. It ends exactly the way it should. But without getting into that and debating that, right? I think it would be a lot more interesting to go way back to the time of the ancients.
Because there's some real, like the stuff Sephiroth talks about where he's like, you know, the crap that was done to the ancients back in the day and the people who protected everyone else from Genova, and these people just hit it out, waited it out, and then took over afterwards and started. Anyways, it's just like, holy cow, there was some like real turmoil back then.
Yeah. My second answer to this, and a lot of people are already touching on it in the chat, I'm getting to it, is the War of the Magi in Final Fantasy VI. That would be freaking awesome. That would be a freaking awesome game to go back and explore what happened during that time period. A lot of mystery kind of shrouded in surrounding that whole time period of its world. And it would be super cool to go back and see like the total destruction that the magic was causing. That, anyways, that would be super cool time period to go back to as well. Trying to think if there are any others that I have like a super huge interest. I mean, Ivalice has been all over the place in its time
what I was going to say with Ivalice is that they actually do tend to do this. Like they will go back 1,000 years and then jump forward a ton. Like they're not so concerned with keeping things in the exact time point period, that the first of all the games happened in. I think that's really cool. That's
why I like those games so much. It's like the same world, but they're not. It's just such a different time and place, and they can change the setting a lot and the way that the cultures work, and it works because it's like this is friggin' 1,000 years of difference. So yeah, I really like that approach. It'd be super cool, I think, for both 7 and 6 if they did that. With Final Fantasy X.
Well, 10.
15 is actually a pretty good answer too. I thought of that.
15 in the past. I want to know the way the crystals work and the way that magic in that world functions. Were it not in a modern setting, would I almost be cooler? Maybe. I'd like to see that though.
I think that they may be exploring that with the Arden DLC that's coming out, and that's one of the reasons why.
Way back.
I think that is kind of way back because Arden's like a long effing time ago. Like that whole thing with the Star Scourge and Arden stuff. He's been alive for a while. So it's like if you've seen the concept art for like Arden's time period, it's like a very different. It's very different. It's not like a modern world. It's pretty cool. So I'm really excited. Of all the DLCs they announced, that's the one I'm most excited for this reason. I think it's a different time period, a different culture, a different, just a very different way of seeing the Final Fantasy 15 world. They could go back even further to like the time of the Astrals and like the creation of man and stuff like that. That would be sweet too. The whole like rebellion of Ifrit and stuff like that could be a really interesting thing to explore in 15's world as well, and see that world before it became the modernized sort of world that it is now. With Final Fantasy X, I'm sure there's some cool stuff to explore there as well. A lot of, they've sort of made the connection to Final Fantasy VII's world, so it might just be
I heard Katase talk about that,
I think that's so dumb. But anyways.
But it's so far in a different time period, it's irrelevant.
Yeah. They could go back to the time of the war between Bavel and Zanarkand, though. Like that could be kind of a cool thing to explore. And another story I would like to see, rather than continuing to go in the future and continuing to talk about Titus and Yuna or whatever, and their relationship getting together and falling apart a million times or whatever they're doing now, is to do the story of Aren and Jekt, and I forget Yuna's dad's name.
Their whole.
Anyways, their pilgrimage, right?
What they were doing,
that I think that could be made into a cool game. That's something I'd be interested to see.
And like what went wrong, basically.
Yeah. Anyways, those are some of my thoughts on that. I'm sure there are lots of other really cool pieces of lore throughout the series that could be explored in Final Fantasy VIII with the sorceresses of the past. And
yeah, that somebody brought up 8, and I thought about the sorceresses, and I was like, that would be very interesting, actually.
There's probably a lot of stuff you could dive into that could be cool, but those would be the ones that I in particular would like to see. Thank you for that question, Chalk Rob. Good one. All right, let's move on to our last one. This comes from Dude McGuy. This one's going to take some time reading. Here we go. Gotta freaking get some oxygen. All right. It seems to me that in the last 10 years or so, Western entertainment has become stuck in a constant loop of hype culture. This seems to be especially true for video games and comic book movies. Absolutely true. We get trailers and sneak peeks months or years before release. See or read many interviews, panels, or news stories about development and production leading up to the release. Get hit with an inescapable blast of marketing all over TV, YouTube, Twitch, and social media during a month of or the week of the release. And then anything with a huge budget has to tease or lead into a sequel by the end of it. You know, the after credits scene that they always have, right? A sequel that usually hasn't even started production yet, he says. I think this is a very bad thing for us as fans for several reasons, but I'm mostly concerned that it pushes fans into 3 camps. Camp number 1, fans who bought into the hype and were ultimately disappointed with the final game or film. They feel let down, so the months or years they spent following the game or movie's progress now feels like a waste of time, and now they may judge the film or game as worse than it actually turned out. 2, fans who became so invested in the game or film being great that they have lowered their critical thinking or analysis going into it and might even become overzealous defenders of the game or film. To them, they spent so much time in the hype machine that they have convinced themselves that the game or movie will be great before they even watch or play it. Fans who will never try the game or film simply because they resent the hype praise it is receiving before it's even released. This makes it very hard for the average person to know if they are playing or what they're playing or watching is really good, or if they're simply a victim of the hype loop and set their expectations too high. Critics can easily fall for this too. Avatar, the James Cameron's Avatar, received several perfect scores from well-known critics and outlets back in 2009, but it's now just a footnote when discussing great films of the last decade. And yet it's getting 4 sequels because the movie studios know that if the production and trailers are good enough, it'll rake in the money. Do you think that hype culture has harmed our ability to judge and enjoy media for what it is? And what do you think the long-term effects of this will be on consumers and Hollywood, the gaming industry? Will audiences eventually get burnt out on hype culture, or is it an unending loop? This is going to take a minute to break down. Do you have thoughts?
Just in general, I mean, hype culture, it almost exemplifies everything that's wrong with the world today. Like, it's like social media. You've got to get the likes and the retweets and the favorites and the everything, right? You've got to basically everything comes down to whether or not you can like exploit it properly, and a lot of that comes down to just hyping people up. Even though people never deliver, humans are really bad at like making decisions, I guess, just in general, all the time about anything. And humans tend to get, you know, the whole saying like "fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, shame on me." Well, humans, it's more like fool me a million
once,
times,
fetch me once, fetch you, fetch me twice, fetch me.
Yeah, well, it's all because that number ends up getting very high. Like it's you have been oftentimes you've been fooled by the same thing thousands of times in your life over and over. You keep buying it because your brain. I actually talked a little bit about this in my video that was released, I think, just yesterday. But we talked about the suspension of disbelief when you for storytelling, right? Now, suspension of disbelief isn't just for movies. It's not just you watch a movie and you suspend disbelief. It also is when your friend is telling you a story that she heard from her friend, right? Or he heard from his friend. I didn't mean to sound sexist. Point being, suspension of disbelief works in all category of all story types, of any type of story being told. So people are willing to, as soon as they hear something, believe it on a whim before they question it and become skeptical. We really have to work to kind of suppress that part of ourselves, to not believe everything we hear, because people want to believe everything we hear. How many things have you heard that have been false? I don't know. A ton. Probably most of the things you've ever heard in your life are not real or not true. But you still will, most of the time, suspend your disbelief when you hear a story. Whether it's fictional, when you watch a documentary. How many times have you watched a documentary and it turns out that they were exaggerating or they were just telling you one side of the whole thing? Basically every documentary, because that's what they all do. They're all ideologically driven at this point. And so, but what do? The next documentary you watch, you get all up in arms about whatever thing that director happened to be passionate about, despite the fact he omitted tons of information to make his point. Like, people are really bad at this. And so our suspension of disbelief carries into stuff like this, stuff like what, the studios are doing. People buy into the hype over and over and over. And I don't know that necessarily it's going to stop. You got to think least common denominator here. You can't just think, okay, will the smart people eventually get sick of it? Okay, will the, but what about the people who are just like, what about the sheep, Because we all know that they're ants in the world. They're sheep. They're people that just go and do. When will they get sick of it? That's the real question, because that's where most people kind of go. Most people don't really have the time to make these complicated decisions about what movie to watch. It's just like, where's the hype? That's what I'm going to watch. And that's where it all goes. So as much as we might get sick of it, if there's a majority of people that are just going to buy it over and over, it's not going to change. It's not going to stop.
Yeah.
People believe what they're told. They just
you look at the way like movies were advertised and how trailers were made in like the 80s and 90s. Ever gone back and like watched old trailers?
I did just recently when I made my last video. I watched a trailer for The Terminator because I included it in my video. Holy crap, it was a bad trailer.
It's so bad.
It was really bad.
And you'd go to the movie theater.
The sound design is awful.
See a terrible trailer for something and be like, hey, maybe I'll go see that. And then you'd maybe like look at the newspaper for like the review or whatever when it would come out. That was like the extent of that. Maybe you'd see a spot on TV if it was a really big budget movie, right? The art of making really excellent trailers that a lot of times are better than the actual films themselves.
Perfected, man.
Sort of came to be in the digital age, right? When people were online, you could watch trailers online. I remember around the time that the Lord of the Rings films were coming out, we'd start downloading the Two Towers trailer before school, and then
that's right.
We'd go to school all day and come back home and be like, oh, it's like 90%. It's like almost done. I can almost watch it.
Yeah. Oh my
and
gosh.
You get so excited to watch that trailer, right? And we even went to see the first movie in theaters for like, I don't know, the 9th time or something, so that we could watch the exclusive trailer for Two Towers that came at the end of that particular showing. I don't know why, but we went like downtown Phoenix to go to the one theater that was showing that particular trailer. Anyways, it's gotten crazier. Yeah. It's gotten crazier and crazier. The more accessible and the faster internet speeds have gotten, and streaming has become normal and that sort of thing. And so it's like
social media, and it has exploited humans' worst tendencies.
Exactly, right? Because back in the 80s and 90s, they had to pay a ton of money if they wanted to put that in front of you in your house. They'd have to pay for a spot as a commercial on during primetime television or something like that. And it's now they can just release it on their own YouTube channel that they for nothing, for free. Right?
And people share it.
Millions of people are going to watch it, and every single news media outlet's going to cover that, and like it has allowed them to make lots of trailers for the trailer that's coming later in the week. Like,
that's stupid. I don't like that that's happening.
It's crazy, right? But yes, you're right. It exploits the tendencies that we have, and this is kind of the point I was trying to circle around to, is that when I saw The Fellowship of the Ring in theaters, I think that the first Harry Potter film had come out a month beforehand or something like that.
Oh, it was around the same time.
I think it was November of 2001.
You might be thinking of the second Harry Potter.
I can't remember which it was. I thought it was the first movie, because I thought that they were released basically 1 month after each other.
The first one was 99.
That the book came out in 99 or 98 or something.
Oh, 91. Hold on, let me check this out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Go ahead and tell me.
I'm pretty sure that the first Harry Potter film came out
2001 Harry Potter. You're right.
Thanksgiving, and I went to see that at Thanksgiving in 2001 with my family, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, cool.
Yeah, November 2001.
That was so sweet. I freaking love that movie." And I was way into that. I was reading that book. I was probably on the second one at that point, and I had seen some trailers in the movie theaters for The Fellowship of the Ring. There was something about it, though, that was just kind of like, because I've always been into fantasy. I've always been a huge fan of fantasy. But for whatever reason, I had never heard of Lord of the Rings at that age. And that particular movie was like, that looks all right. I'll go see that because my brother wants to see it. And so I went with my mom and I went with my brother to see that movie. And that was a freaking life-changing experience. That movie was...
Yeah, me too.
Unbelievably good. And this is not just me being enraptured at a young age and being impressionable. That has a lot to do with it, I'm sure. But I've seen that film with different perspective the older I've got. I'm not just looking at it with nostalgic glasses on. I regularly rewatch this film and keep it present in my mind and analyze the crap out of it every time. And that is as near to a perfect film as I've ever seen in my entire life. It is so good. And I had no expectation going into it. I was like, never heard of this, don't know what this is, and that's what I got. And it was just like, holy crap. Lightning in a bottle situation, right? Yeah. And even with the way that those movies were filmed, back to back to back, that helps with consistency, continuity, especially with your tone and your look and feel, and trying to make them feel like they're all part of the same ongoing story, right? It's like you just turn the page and the thing keeps going when you go see the movie the next year.
Yeah.
I spent that entire year getting hyped all day at school.
Me too.
Not being able to focus in class because I know that it's downloading at home. I can't wait to go home and watch it. And I read the entire trilogy that year.
Yeah, read
twice.
All the books twice. Yeah.
Twice in that year. And I was drawing ring wraiths in my freaking notebooks in class. And I just absolutely just every moment that I could live and breathe in my free time, it was spent in praise and in adoration of the Lord of the Rings. Yeah. And then I go to see that second movie, and I have never been more disappointed in a film experience in my entire life than I was when I saw The Two Towers in theaters.
I remember being disappointed too.
So my opinion on it has softened since then. I think that it's a very well-made film, and that all three of them, it's one of the best movie trilogies in the history of Hollywood for sure.
Sure.
And they deserved the awards,
17 Oscars or however many,
all that stuff. They definitely deserved that. But the magic, just the pure lightning in the bottle magic, perfection of pacing, and the way that the music worked in tandem with the exact performance that was just exactly right in the first movie was never recaptured, I felt, in the following two. It did not feel to me like we turned the page and just continued and that the look and feel was the same. And I think of all the things I criticized over the years and had problems with, at the real core of it is that I didn't feel the spirit of the first film carrying over into the second and the third. But the difference is that I did that all year long before movie 2 came out. And then the next time, I didn't think about Lord of the Rings that much. It was like,
Right.
I was doing other things. I was in a band, writing music. I had a girlfriend and stuff, busy in school, doing my thing. And then the time the movie came around, everyone's getting hyped about it and they were wanting to like dress up and stuff. And I was like, I'll do that with you. I'll do that with you guys, I guess, because, the group of people was doing it that I was with. So I was like, fine, I'll do it. But I went in with a completely different mindset and I didn't pay attention. I didn't watch every trailer 15,000 times. And I didn't like just live and breathe Lord of the Rings that year. And I had a much better experience in the third film. And so I think there's something to be said about the fact that it's very important for people to take control of their own level of hype and temper themselves, because it's not going to happen within the Hollywood machine. They're going to exploit that tendency for people to obsess over something and be like, I had this magical, life-changing experience with this. This was unreal. And I want that again. I want that again. I want that again. And you just obsess over having that experience again. And with lightning in the bottle situations, it's very rare for the sequel to follow up. I mean, there's very few examples. It has happened, but where the sequel follows up and it's better or delivers at least the same.
Yeah. I think The Dark Knight, the second Hunger Games.
Empire Strikes Back. Yeah.
Those might be the only ones.
Some people would argue The Godfather Part 2, which I think is actually legit. 2. The second movie, I think, is really excellent. But
they're both good.
In any case, I mean, the way I look at it is like we ourselves, we're looking inward. We're at fault, really, for propagating this machine. We're the ones who wait until midnight for a release, and then, we're the ones who, give billions of views to the trailer for the trailer and speculate and comment and talk in forums and just go crazy about it. We're the ones doing that. They're just providing the opportunity to continue to obsess. Yeah. And the more that we do obsess and the more that we build an idea in our minds about what we want that experience to be next year when the next one comes out or whatever, or when that film comes out, it's impossible for the director to reach into your mind and go, that's what that guy's expecting. I better make sure I do here and do that individually for every single person of the 10 million people that are going to see this film. I have to reach into their brain and like try and it's not going to happen. It's this own guy's mind and his own vision and the team's vision. And that's why it's so hard to separate yourself from what you want out of it and try to say like, I mean, I recently fell into this too with the casting of Superman. What's his freaking name?
In the new thing in The Witcher.
What's his effing name, dude? Why am I blanking on that?
Oh, he's in that new Mission Impossible. He's such a beast.
What the F is his name? Anyway, someone's gonna say in a minute.
Easel.
You're so close.
Cavill.
Henry Cavill. That's it.
Cavill. There you go.
So I fell into that a little bit. I had, this idea of what I think the character is, and I didn't think that he fits that, both his temperament in acting as well as his look. And so it's like, my gut reaction to that was so strong. And it's like you were saying earlier, this is very much like an exploitation of human nature to get really invested in something that you like and love. And that's what The Witcher 3 was for me. It was like a life-changing type experience, right? Sure. And like so my idea of The Witcher is that. And so when I see something being made and it's not looking and feeling like it's going to deliver that kind of experience for me, the initial reaction is to go like, oh no, like that's not right. But it is possible, and I think it's really important to step back after that gut reaction, to temper yourself, to say it's okay to look at what someone else's vision of this is and find that interesting in and of itself and not obsess. and just let it be what it is. And a lot of times you'll like things better. That's not to say it's going to guarantee it's going to be any good. Sometimes you can do that and it's like, yeah, that still pretty much sucks. I think I was right on that.
That's
fine. But at least you're not going to be crushed by it. At least you're not going to be in a position where you feel like he's saying, the three camps. You either are just crushed by like, oh, this is not at all what I expected, or you were so invested in it that you now have to defend it and you have to make it into the experience you thought it was going to be and make sure everyone knows it was that, right? And then like you got people like infighting and
if anyone disagrees, you got to put them in their place,
right? Like with what happened with episode 8 of Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways. Yeah, I don't think it's a healthy thing overall, but it's not going away. And I think each of us is responsible in our own right to sort of like step away and consume more responsibly.
Sure. You get upset at everyone else for doing whatever. But when it comes down to it, like, get your own house in order first. Like, figure yourself out first before you go around telling other people to stop getting hyped about superhero movies. Because everyone's got their thing, and you kind of can't help it to some extent. Getting hyped for things is like, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun. It's interesting. It's time consuming, but sometimes, you spend time, you make friends through common interest, and you can't wait for Iron Man 4 either. Oh, me too. When are they going to make it? And you end up building hype. But honestly, going back to what I said about suspension of disbelief, that's almost the same hype that like if you're exchanging rumors with a friend or somebody and it's like, oh, I heard this happened. No way, really? And there's an excitement that goes along with being told a story. And you almost can't help but respond that way because it's fun to be in the know, to be like involved in menial kind of things. But hey, we have a common interest or a common friend or a common enemy or a common type of thing that we like, and it's just so easy to just like jump into it head first, but it's so typically not a good idea to do that. It's almost never a good idea to do that, but it's fun, and that's probably why it keeps being propagated, probably why it continues unabated, just because it's fun to get hyped up. And these companies are like, people want to have fun and get hyped. Okay, we'll let them do that. And it's kind of how humans are, and that's unfortunate, but it's a fact.
Got a comment here from Ya Amankwa. I don't think there's such a thing as lightning in a bottle. I think it's hard to replicate the feeling of experiencing something new with a sequel, but it isn't impossible. I think we're probably thinking about the term lightning in a bottle in a different way. Lightning in a bottle, as far as I understand it and the way that I'm using it, is more about like even when you have like all the right pieces in place, there are a lot of movies that come out. It's like, ooh, look at the cast, look at the director, look at like who's behind this. Sometimes it just doesn't quite deliver on some of like their best work. Sometimes there is a level of just I'm sure you've experienced this, Kason. Have you ever, when you're editing, right, and you drop a piece of music into your timeline or whatever,
and it just happens
it lines up just perfect. It crescendos at exactly the right moment. Okay, so that's kind of more of what I'm talking about.
The stars have aligned. Yeah.
It's like things are just flowing and it's just working. And it's like, yes, everyone involved is super talented and they have high expectations of themselves, a high standard, they work really hard. But sometimes like things just fall into place like that and it's just right. And it just happens. And it's just like, whoa, like that's amazing. And sometimes you're working on something, the same core group of people working really hard, just as hard, maybe even harder, and everything just doesn't seem to work out. And everything is harder than it should be, and everything goes wrong. And lightning in the bottle, in the way that I understand it, is more about, not about the fact that they got lucky, but about the fact that really talented people came together, and on top of that, it just flowed. It was just easy. It just worked. Everything just worked exactly right. And that is not something that is replicatable. What's the word for that?
Replicable.
Replicable.
Yeah.
That's not something that's replicable because there is no one thing you can pin. It's just like, it just happened. and not in every single facet of the whole process, but in the key areas, in the areas that really mattered and that really delivered on the final product. So that's at least what I'm referring to when I say lightning in a bottle.
Sure.
Let's see. I think that's it. I think we're done, fellas. That is the end of today's podcast.
I don't really have any, so do you want to indulge a little bit?
That is the end of today's podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. As we said, next week will be the final episode of the Dark Pixel Podcast, number 125. If you have suggestions for ways that you would, I don't know, like to send it off or pay homage or something like that to the DP podcast, let me know. Maybe we can get Landon to come back for the final episode. I don't know if that'll work with his schedule.
I can talk to him about that. By the way, it will still be a podcast. It just won't be called Dark Pixel Podcast anymore.
Got to make that very clear for everybody.
Make sure that's clear. Expect us every week.
We will still have a podcast. It'll just be called something else, and it'll be structured a little differently. But I'm very excited. But it will still be great. So, thank you
better. In fact,
I think it'll be a lot better.
Me too. I think so.
Anyways, you guys are beasts. If you're listening to this audio only, come check us out on YouTube, Dark Pixel Gaming, until 2 weeks from now, when we'll be called something else.
We'll let you know later.
We'll keep you in the know. You guys have a good one. Peace out.